Hi, this is Mary Ellen Carsley, and I'm here to guide you through this screencast on 10 things that I've learned about online teaching. And I selected doing this screencast with this article in particular because I have now been a Malone online teacher for 3 years for Introduction to Architecture and Aesthetic Philosophy. And I probably did the most profound mistakes of any newbie. So I felt like I wanted to walk you through this article and share some of the mistakes that I made so you could avoid making them yourself. So the first one, as you walk through this article, you're going to notice number one is teaching online is a lot of work, and that is absolutely true. You should never underestimate how much work the work that you're going to have. The you do not need to prepare lectures. You shouldn't think of it as necessarily a the online class as a situation where you are lecturing and they are listening. However, you part of the preparation of the class is creating variety of activities and also a variety of ways of disseminating your information and finding an order in that variety so that the students have tools and through lines that they can gain skill with and follow through the entire curriculum. So that takes a lot of upfront work to do. You have to know where you're going and how you're going to get there, essentially. And one of the things that I would really recommend is having a trusted reader. Now, I had Julia Maxey as my trusted reader for my curriculum, and it was really helpful to have another Malone teacher or another online teacher who has a little bit more experience than you, who can say, yes, I see where you're going with that, but, and then to get that kind of feedback. And definitely paying attention to the feedback that your students give you and asking for their feedback in that. And that gets us to students appreciate regular communication and timely feedback on their progress. So communication is truly the key. You have to be looking for their emails and make sure that you can contact them and that they can contact you very easily. And remember, they don't know what they don't see in writing. You're not going to see them in the halls. They're not going to be able to stop by after class so you can have an in-depth conversation. So you may want to make sure that however you're grading, that you give very explicit rubrics, that you all, and within those rubrics that you give really thorough comments and thorough feedback about that. Also, too, remember that Skyping is always, and setting up a meeting within whatever platform that you're using, and so that you can have a one-on-one conversation is always an option. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the picture that you can talk in is worth even more than that. So keep that in mind and in doing that. And number three, many great tools exist but aren't always necessary. That gets back to the first point that I was making is find some tools that you can use. I'm very fond of Miro, which used to be known as real-time whiteboard. Also screencasting, and also there's a number of other tools that you can use. But make sure that your assignments are not a tool of the day, because that's very frustrating for the students to constantly have a learning curve on learning how to use all these different learning tools, and then they don't revisit them. What I really give you advice, and my advice is find three solid tools and stick with them, and make sure that every time you are introducing a tool, that in the class you actually have a discussion with the students on how to use the tool and then walk them through it. Another tool that I'm fond of is Flipgrid, and I walk them through that online. That's part of our class time together so that they can see, and I also create samples so that they have samples to compare and contrast with. And then as you begin to teach online, you also can ask permission from prior students to use some of their work as examples of as well. So they can be walked through by students who've been through the class that you're teaching. Number four, assignments and activities take more time online. And that gets exactly to the point that I was discussing, that you're going to need to learn, that you have that learning curve with whatever tool that you're using. Also, too, you're not there to just answer that question that gets called out in the classroom. So that means that there might be time where you have to exchange emails. You might have to set up a meeting time and things like that. And my advice too would be to go with the flow when it comes with these assignments. Oftentimes assume goodwill that the students are struggling, and that they are trying to do the work, but make sure that you don't slam them. That my advice would be is not to slam them in their grade because they didn't have an understanding of a tool, but to be sure that their understanding of the material is there. So separating those two things out can sometimes take some experience and a little bit more time in finding a conversation about that, but make sure that you don't overcommit the students every single week. You really want to make sure that they have time to learn the tool and then also to do the assignment in a thorough way, and doing that. The next thing is students need extrinsic motivation. So one of the things that I'm really fond of doing is I love to have some other platform in which, other than email, because as we all know, secondary students often struggle with that skill of just answering their email. So I like to have another platform in where I can sort of foster enthusiasm for the subject matter. So I used to use Google Page. I used to use a Google page to do that. But I also have a blog that I use, and I send reminders to the students via email or by the platform that we're teaching in, and remind them, hey, look at the blog. I posted a fun article. And I try to make sure that those articles or interviews are sort of short, hip, fresh, new, something that gets them engaged to see the connection of what they're studying to the outside world. I also make sure that, I choose from media outlets and things that the students themselves, are find to be, for lack of a better word, cool. So, Vice documentaries are very popular. Anything along, whatever the flavor of the month or of the year is, I try to draw from that and make sure that they're voices that are meaningful to them. And maybe even not necessarily voices that are disseminating information. Maybe they're disagreeing with what we've been talking about in class. Maybe they offer a completely different and unexpected perspective of the material. And then that can be a source of motivating the students because they may not agree with that, or they may have a completely different point of view that they're going to want to express in that article. So look for those opportunities to do that. Definitely give deadlines. And I really want to emphasize, when you're teaching online, it is super important that you are organized. If you are not several weeks ahead of the students, it will show. And it will show because you're going to be confusing to the kids. So you need to make sure that your deadlines are mapped out. You need to stick to them. You need to change your schedule if you have put it online. You cannot, it is totally unfair to go in, change something, and then send out an email and say, oh, I make sure you check it because I sent it. That just doesn't work. Like I said, you're not going to see these kids in the hall. They're not always checking their emails. They're not always checking your blog or whatever whatever other engagement that you're using. So you need to really make sure that you post those deadlines and you stick to them. Also, too, you remember that you are competing with their regular class schedule, particularly if you're teaching an online class in the Malone system. You're competing not only with whatever their class schedule is in their particular school, but you're also competing with all of the cultural components. You're competing with their athletic schedule, with their music lessons, with their play practices. And so it's really important that you make sure that you give those deadlines, you emphasize them. I mean, sometimes I think when I'm in class, I'm just like, God, have I said this a dozen times? You're probably just saying it enough at that point if you feel like, oh, I'm just repeating myself. So make sure that you remind them of those deadlines, post those deadlines, and be consistent. Stick to those deadlines. And then the number 7, online courses are not right for all students. You know, some students really need that one-on-one interaction. And when you're teaching online, particularly in secondary school, this is a time of self-discovery, and it may be just this is not working for this student. That's that, and again, that gets back to that assume goodwill. If you have a student who is completely like they are not showing up to class, they are not answering your emails, then you need to contact their institution. You need to make sure that you actually have a conversation with the student, find out what is going on, and part of it might actually be that it's just intimidating to be in front of the computer and in front of a camera for them. Some of it might be that they simply do not have those executive functioning skills to deal with this course that's completely outside of their regular schedule, and that is filled with, as I mentioned, not only their academic commitments, but also their athletic and their arts commitments as well. So just again, assume goodwill, but also ask questions rather than making accusations or just going out and failing them. I mean, if they've screwed up, they're probably going to be the first person to say that. They're probably going to say, "Hey, I forgot. I didn't check it. I need to do that." And then you can address the specific problem that you're having. Um, you definitely need to ask the students what works for them and what doesn't. So this makes feedback forms really, really essential. Now, in the Malone system, they have feedback forms both at the middle of the semester and at the end of the semester. But I would actually ask you to advise you, especially when you're a first-time teacher, that you need to get feedback after that first project. You need to find out, what's working for those students. Is there too much of a learning curve on some online tool that you're using or some digital tool that you're using? Also, too, one of the things that is really important to keep in mind, and this is where feedback truly helped me, is there is an assumption oftentimes of a sort of baseline resource availability. And I have learned the hard way that not all schools have the same amount of resources available. Some kids, they just do not have Wi-Fi, and they don't have Wi-Fi everywhere in their life. Some students do not, asking kids to buy something special, a book, or a physical tool or anything, could be a financial hardship. And also some schools do not have the financial support or the material support to give these students. Now, here at Severn, we give the students a lot of support in navigating these classes. It has been my experience that is very, very much not the norm throughout the Malone system. Some of these kids are really on their own taking these classes, and they do not have adults there helping them navigate all of this. So it's very, very important to kind of keep that in mind and to get that feedback. To get a lot of feedback as much as possible and to get it early on so you can tweak and make your class as workable for as many people as possible. The next thing is share ideas, collaborate, and commiserate about online teaching experience. That's why I'm here. And I would definitely say one of the things that really, really helped me was I had the opportunity to actually meet other online teachers in the Malone system through a conference that we had one summer. If you have that kind of professional development available to you, whether it be through the independent, Association of Independent Schools, whether it be through the online system that you're teaching in, whether it be Malone or something else, definitely do that. I learned probably more from talking to other online teachers than I did from anything else that I read or from any kind of other experiences that I had. It was truly, truly helpful to find out what worked and what didn't. One of the things, though, that kind of happened in that, though, that I realized that, and this is where I actually wrote 21 lectures at the beginning, and the idea of a flipped classroom, nobody said that to me my first semester. And so that's one of the things is that takes us as we go on here when you're talking about ideas to collaborate and commiserate. Your kids should be doing most of the talking when you're meeting in class. So what you really are moderating and adding information to that conversation. So the classroom is definitely flipped, and just learn everything you possibly can about a flipped classroom. That's really going to help you out a lot in doing that. Also, to the in number 10, teaching online can inform what you do in the classroom, and it truly, truly can. And also, I have found tools, particularly Flipgrid, where my brick and mortar students can actually see what my online students are doing. And one of the things that became really, really exciting was this became an opportunity to build some community because my students in brick and mortar really wanted to meet my digital students, and my digital students really wanted the same thing, because one of the things is they become this kind of very strange little community, and they're never in the same room together. So that idea of building community, that idea of finding those ways to make personal connections is something that is useful in any classroom, whether you're online or whether you're in the classroom itself. The idea of good collaboration skills when it comes to doing projects, and those sort of business skills. So my teaching mentor, one of them told me years ago, she goes, "We don't teach our subject, we just teach about life through the lens of our subject." And I remember that a lot because, when you're teaching about life through the lens of whatever you're teaching, the skills of working with strangers, of how to make connection across digital borders, across desk, those skills are all the same and all and useful no matter where you are. So in order to, and in wrapping up, the couple of things that it just highlights that I would want to hit on to reiterate is be consistent in what you choose in the methods that you choose to use. Don't throw anything out there to the kids that you haven't tried 3 times yourself to make sure absolutely that it works. Make sure that you are organized and that you stick to your deadlines. You do need to change your schedule in order to maintain consistency. If that's what it takes, you have to do that. I would, if I had to give a number for preparing a class, an excellent online class, I would say if you're going to be teaching an hour, you're going to have 6 hours of prep put into that class. Now, that sounds really, that's a minimum. That would be 6 to 8 hours put into every single class. Now, that being said, there are going to be classes in which in which you are going to be just guiding a conversation. You're not going to be preparing new material. And remember, you don't have to have new material every single class. That was one of the big mistakes that I made as well the first time. You have to give the students a chance to digest it and to talk through it, and how they digest it and how they talk through it is where you come in with those online tools or with a guided discussion or however you're going to do that. The beauty of it is once you have it written, it's done. Now you've done it. Now you're tweaking, and so you don't need to worry about that kind of time investment as you move into the future. Your class just gets cleaner and tighter as you go along in doing that. And the last thing that I would highly recommend is make connections. You make connections with your students, but also make connections with other online teachers. Ask for advice, and definitely ask lots and lots of questions and getting started with it. And look at as much information, many online classes as you can to sort of decide, what appeals to you and how you're going to work your through lines and your toolbox into that online class. And to that end, if you have any questions, I am available and happy to share any specifics of my course with you and to help you answer any questions that you may have. So I hope that was helpful, and thank you very much for listening.